Gunnar sat at the head of the table in the workshop's conference room, the space buzzing with the low hum of anticipation. Around him sat the pack, his trusted team, each with a different skill set and role that had forged them into an unbreakable unit. A few days had passed since Reagan had returned from headquarters with the proposal for Echo Division to work with Homeland Security. Now there was a new matter at hand that needed the pack's attention. Sophia had arrived unannounced that morning, a rare occurrence, and one that signalled urgency. After receiving word from an old informant, she had come with vital information. Gunnar's face was hard as stone as he recounted what Sophia had shared. "Apparently there's a place called the Shadow Realm Bar, right here on our doorstep," Gunnar began, his voice level but his gaze intense. Sophia's contact, someone she's been working with for a while, spilled everything. This bar isn't just a hole in the wall for a few supernatural misfits. It's a full-on hub where beings from all over come to relax, trade, and network. DeSera raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "So, a supernatural bar hidden in plain sight? And we're just hearing about it now?" "That's the thing," Gunnar replied. "It's meant to stay hidden. This isn't the kind of place just anyone walks into. You need supernatural blood or a special invitation. Our informant is a creature himself, something that Sophia had suspected but couldn't confirm until now. His name is Shade. He's the one who gave us the scoop on this place." The pack exchanged glances, each processing the information in their own way. Darren leaned back in his chair, his usual casual demeanour tempered with curiosity. "So this Shade guy is informing on his own people? Sounds like he's got his own agenda." Gunnar nodded. "Exactly. He's looking out for himself first, as always. But he's been helpful to Sophia in the past. According to him, the Shadow Realm Bar is where beings go to get away from human eyes and blend in. It's a marketplace too. Artifacts and rare items are exchanged there, things we wouldn't want falling into the wrong hands." Eli's ears perked up and she leaned forward, her elven curiosity piqued. "Are we going to just walk in? I imagine if these beings hear our names, they'll be on guard. We've dealt with a lot of their kind before. Some might even recognize us." "That's what I'm thinking," Gunnar said, locking eyes with Eli and Darren. "You two are the least recognizable among us in the supernatural world. The rest of us have been around longer, and if our names are brought up, we'll draw attention fast. Darren, you've got a way with people that tends to keep things balanced. Your attitude might help keep things neutral. And Eli, well, if things get out of hand, I know you'll be able to handle yourself." Darren smirked, but his gaze was thoughtful. "So, you want us to go undercover, scope out the place, and see what's what?" "Exactly. We need intel on who frequents this place and what kinds of items are being traded. Sophia thinks Black Dawn might be trying to infiltrate it, but we don't have any solid evidence yet. If they're in there, we need to know, but be subtle. We can't risk them catching on to us just yet." Aeliana, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "This bar isn't just a casual hangout. The true heart of it is hidden in the back, accessible only by a doorway that responds to supernatural energy. Beyond that door, creatures can drop their human disguises. They'll be in their true forms, free from human scrutiny. They operate under a strict truce, though. It's the only place where rivals can meet without tearing each other apart." DeSera glanced over at Eli. "You sure you're up for it? This place sounds intense." Eli's expression hardened and she nodded. "I've faced worse. If it helps keep us all safe, I'm in." "Good," Gunnar said. "And Darren, try to keep a low profile. The last thing we need is a confrontation. Aeliana, I want you on standby. If anything goes sideways, we'll need a quick exit." Aeliana inclined her head. "Understood. I can set up a portal close to the area just in case." Gunnar leaned back, his gaze sweeping across the room. "This mission is crucial. We're walking into a den full of beings that would love to see us fall. But if Black Dawn is there, we need to know what they're after. Eli, Darren, keep your heads down and ears open. This isn't about fighting, it's about gathering information." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "And remember, We're in this together. No one gets left behind. The drive to the Shadow Realm bar was a typical Darren production. Music blasting, upbeat chatter, and his signature Stealth Mission soundtrack booming through the speakers. He kept calling it a date, while Eli repeatedly reminded him it was strictly business. "Feels like a date to me," Darren said, grinning as he glanced over at her. "Just you, me, and a little covert operation. What could go wrong?" "Everything, if you're involved," Eli quipped, smirking. She looked out the window, eyeing the bar as they approached. "Just remember, we're here to blend in. Don't blow our cover." They parked the Wolfmobile outside a nondescript dive bar on the outskirts of town. Eli surveyed the exterior, trying to sense any hidden magical wards or lingering energies, but everything seemed mundane. Once inside, they slipped into the shadowy interior and found a table in the corner. The place was as unremarkable as it looked outside, dim lights, sticky floors, and the faint smell of spilled beer. But the occasional patron slipping into a back corner and not returning suggested something more. "I'll check out that back corner. You stay here and try not to attract too much attention," Eli whispered, already getting up from the table. Darren gave her a lazy salute. "Stay out of trouble, boss." Eli navigated her way to the back, where she found a door that seemed almost ordinary. To an untrained eye, it might go unnoticed. She placed a hand on the wood and felt a subtle vibration, almost like the hum of a low, mystical current. With a glance over her shoulder, she stepped through. Beyond the door, the air shifted. The lighting turned softer, almost otherworldly, and she was greeted by a bouncer who glanced at her with disinterest before extending a hand. "Weapons in the box," he grunted. Eli reluctantly handed over a small silver dagger, a cherished blade she kept tucked in her boot. As it dropped into the box, she scanned the room. Creatures of all shapes and sizes mingled openly, some with wings, others with scales, a few with features that defied even her understanding. They seemed relaxed, as if this place was a neutral zone, safe from the troubles of the outside world. The tables were decorated with glowing orbs, and strange, iridescent liquids bubbled in glasses that seemed to change colour with each sip. A troll with 3 eyes chatted amicably with a fairy dressed in what looked like leather armour, while a cloaked figure that seemed half shadow, half human, haggled over the price of a gleaming artifact. Eli kept her guard up, fascinated but wary. As interesting as this world was, she knew better than to let down her defences. After making a mental note of her surroundings, she turned to head back to Darren, eager to share what she had seen. Back in the human side of the bar, however, Darren was, well, predictably distracted. After leaving Eli to explore, Darren strolled over to the bar, where a striking woman with fiery red hair and piercing green eyes was giving him a curious look. Her gaze was intense, and he felt a strange warmth wash over him as he met her eyes. "Hey there, name's Darren. Mind if I join you?" he asked, flashing his most charming smile. "Not at all," she replied, her voice smooth and inviting. "I'm Rose. So, what brings a guy like you to a place like this?" "Oh, just taking in the ambience," Darren said, giving her a wink. "It's not every day you run into someone with your style." Rose leaned in, her eyes glittering with something more than interest. "Careful, Darren. You might just find yourself in over your head." Darren chuckled, feeling more and more at ease in her presence, as if he'd known her forever. He blinked, finding himself leaning closer to her, unable to pull away from her gaze. His head felt fuzzy, almost as if he were in a trance, the world around him dimming until it was just her and those piercing green eyes. Just then, a sharp smack landed on the back of his head, snapping him out of his daze. Darren jerked forward and turned to find Eli standing there, arms crossed and an unimpressed look on her face. "Seriously?" she said, glaring at him. "I leave you alone for 5 minutes, and you're already under some spell?" Rose raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by the interruption. "Jealous girlfriend?" she asked with a playful smirk. "Not exactly. Eli replied, rolling her eyes. He just has a knack for flirting with the wrong type. Darren looked between them, rubbing the back of his head. What just happened? Nothing good, Eli said, grabbing his arm and pulling him away from Rose. She cast a glance back at the redhead, her expression cold. Come on, lover boy. Time to go. Rose simply watched them with a bemused smile, waving her fingers at Darren as he was dragged away. See you around, Darren. Once they were back outside, Eli finally let go of his arm and gave him a sharp look. Do you have any idea what you just walked into? Darren shrugged, still a bit dazed. Not really. I mean, she seemed nice enough. Eli groaned. That was no ordinary woman. She was casting a spell on you. You'd be halfway to telling her your life story if I hadn't stepped in. Hey, I didn't know, Darren protested, holding up his hands defensively. How was I supposed to tell? Well, maybe by not flirting with random women in a bar while we're on a mission, she shot back. You're lucky I caught it in time. She could have had you wrapped around her finger. Darren shrugged sheepishly. I guess I owe you one. Thanks, Eli. Just try to stay focused next time, she replied, giving him a playful nudge. I can't be saving you from every pretty face you see. As they walked back to the Wolfmobile, Darren glanced back at the bar, half expecting to see Rose watching them. But the doorway was empty, and the night seemed eerily quiet. He sighed, sliding into the passenger seat as Eli started the engine. Remind me to buy you a drink next time, he said, flashing her a grin. Or maybe two. One for saving me from that spell, and another for putting up with me. Eli laughed as she drove off, shaking her head. You'll need more than a drink to make up for that one, Darren. Now let's get back and debrief. This place is more dangerous than it looks. Back at the workshop, Darren and Eli found themselves seated in the large, round debriefing room. The entire pack was gathered, each person listening with rapt attention as Eli recounted what they had discovered about the Shadow Realm bar. Gunnar, the pack's stoic leader, sat at the head of the table, his arms crossed and his gaze thoughtful as he absorbed every detail. Beside him, Aeliana Vale, their resident elf and magical consultant, leaned forward with interest, her silver hair reflecting the dim light of the room. Once Eli finished recounting the events, Darren added, And then there's Rose. Not exactly the friendliest character, but she's powerful. Eli thinks she might be preying on human guys in the bar, but I didn't catch on until I was under her spell. Aeliana narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. A dark elf, like Rose in a place like that? It's curious, but it makes sense. Earth has always been a haven of sorts for the supernatural. It's diverse, open, and, to beings from other realms, it's an unregulated playground. Gunnar nodded, digesting this information. So they're here because it's easy to blend in among humans? Sounds plausible. But it makes me wonder, why are they here in the first place? What exactly draws them to Earth? Aeliana offered a soft, mysterious smile. Earth is unique, Gunnar. Most other realms are more rigid, defined by strict laws and old hierarchies. Earth, by contrast, is free, unpredictable. To some, it's an ideal escape. For others, it's an opportunity to explore a new dimension where rules are more fluid and life is constantly evolving. So you're saying they're here for a vacation? Darren asked, a bit incredulous. Aeliana nodded. Some, yes. Earth's diversity is unmatched, both culturally and environmentally. Many find it refreshing. For beings used to structured realms, Earth feels alive. And the naivete of humans? Well, that only makes it easier for them to walk among us unnoticed. Humans rarely suspect the supernatural. Clara chimed in, rubbing her temples. But we've seen it firsthand. Not all these visitors come with good intentions. Some of them cause chaos, whether intentional or not. We can't ignore that. Gunnar nodded, leaning back in his chair with a sigh. We need to consider our approach here. We can't exactly run around town policing every supernatural being. But if we're dealing with threats like Rose, we might need to get creative. I'm thinking about magical inhibitors, Something we could use on the most dangerous visitors to restrict their powers while they're here. It wouldn't have to be permanent, just enough to keep them in check. Aeliana raised an eyebrow. You're talking about magical inhibitors? That's tricky business. Restricting magic can have unpredictable consequences, especially with powerful beings. If it's not handled delicately, it could backfire. Jewel added, but it could work. In my medical experience, temporary suppressants could prevent a lot of harm without being invasive. I could even oversee their effects to make sure there's no adverse reaction. Eli nodded thoughtfully. It's a solid idea, but Rose is a whole other level. I've seen her kind of magic before. Fire magic. She's powerful, and she's not afraid to wield it. She was hanging out on the human side of the bar, which makes me think she might be preying on human men. From what I could tell, she enjoys toying with them, maybe even using them. Darren's face darkened. I'm no expert, but something tells me that a person like Rose wouldn't stop at just a casual, hello. It was like she wanted something from me, and I was none the wiser until Eli smacked me back to reality. Aeliana looked thoughtful. If Rose is targeting humans, she might be feeding on more than just attention. Some dark elves use their magic to absorb energy, especially from unsuspecting humans. It could be as harmless as drawing on their life force for sustenance, or it could be much darker. Clara folded her arms, her face stern. If she's feeding on humans, she's more than just a nuisance. She's a threat. And if she's hanging out in the Shadow Realm bar, she's not the only one we have to worry about. Desera spoke up, her voice tinged with curiosity. So what exactly is the Shadow Realm bar? I mean, beyond the dive bar we saw on the surface. Aeliana sighed, as if grappling with how best to describe the otherworldly place. It's a sanctuary for supernatural beings, a neutral ground of sorts. On the surface, it's just a bar, but beyond a seemingly ordinary door in the back, accessible only to those with supernatural blood or a whispered invitation, lies the true Shadow Realm bar. This hidden sanctuary is worlds apart from the gritty exterior, transforming into a haven for creatures from all realms. Here, they can drop their disguises, interact freely, and trade artifacts or favors without fear of exposure. Eli nodded, adding, I saw it myself. It's surreal, like a marketplace and a bar rolled into one, but with this strange energy in the air. There are symbols on the walls, enchanted artifacts everywhere, and creatures I couldn't even begin to identify. It's like they have their own truce in there, where even rivals abide by some code of neutrality. Are you saying we can't touch them in there? Darren asked, clearly frustrated by the idea. It's not about can't, it's about shouldn't, Aeliana replied. The truce holds because it's mutually beneficial. If anyone, be it human, elf, or otherwise, disturbs that balance, the repercussions could extend far beyond that bar. Gunner's gaze was steely as he looked at each member of the pack. We can't afford to ignore this place, it's too much of a liability. But we need to be careful. For now, let's focus on gathering intel. Eli, Darren, you two did well on recon, but if we're going to move forward, we'll need to understand this place inside and out. The goal is containment, not confrontation. If we have to take action, we do it without disrupting their world. The room fell silent as the team processed this. Finally, Aeliana spoke, her voice firm yet compassionate. We've walked this line before, Gunner. We can handle it. But we need to be mindful of what we're up against. Supernatural beings don't think like humans, and they don't play by human rules. They're here for various reasons: escape, opportunity, curiosity. But that doesn't mean they're all harmless. Jewel nodded, looking at Gunner. We'll be ready for whatever comes. But you're right. We need to get those inhibitors ready. If we can manage the worst offenders, we might be able to keep this from turning into a full-blown conflict. Agreed, Gunner said, standing up. We'll start developing those inhibitors. And in the meantime, Aeliana, keep your ears open for any new intel. The rest of us will stay on alert. If Rose or any other dangerous beings cross our paths, we'll be ready. As they began to wrap up, Eli glanced over at Darren. Maybe next time you'll think twice before letting some mystery woman put you under her spell. Darren grinned, not missing a beat. Hey, I had it under control. Sort of. Besides, I knew you'd have my back. The pack chuckled, the camaraderie palpable despite the serious nature of their mission. They knew the risks they faced, but with each other, they also knew they had a fighting chance. As they filed out of the room, Gunner's voice echoed behind them. Remember, folks, in this game, knowledge is power. The more we know, the better we can protect what's ours. Let's get to work. And with that, they set out, prepared to face whatever mysteries and dangers the Shadow Realm Bar and its supernatural patrons had in store for them. The morning air was crisp as Clara made her way to Gunner's office, her heart heavy yet resolute. She had thought about this for weeks, and now that Gunner was fully recovered and the pack was stable, she knew it was time. Clara knocked on the door and Gunner's familiar voice called for her to enter. Clara stepped inside and Gunner looked up from his desk, a curious expression on his face. Clara, what's on your mind? She took a deep breath. I think it's time I return to Alfheim. Aeliana has offered to resume my training, and I believe there's still much for me to learn. The knowledge and skills I gain there could be invaluable to us. Gunner leaned back in his chair, nodding thoughtfully. You've always had a unique connection to magic. I know how important your studies are to you. But are you sure about this? Clara nodded. I've given it a lot of thought, and with you back at full strength, I know the pack will be in good hands. Omega will come with me, of course, but we won't be gone forever. Just until I've learned what I need to know. Gunner's gaze softened. You've earned it, Clara. We'll manage, and I trust you'll bring back a wealth of knowledge. But make sure you keep in touch. The pack isn't the same without you and Omega around. Clara smiled, relief washing over her. Thank you, Gunner. I'll be back before you know it. She turned to leave, but before she stepped out, she added, Keep an eye on everyone for me, would you? Especially Darren. He has a knack for getting himself into trouble. They shared a chuckle, and with a final nod, Clara left the office, her heart lighter and her mind set on the journey ahead. Later that afternoon, Gunner called Eli into the workshop. She arrived promptly, eager to discuss her next task. He gestured for her to take a seat as he leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. Eli, I need you to work on something important. I want to create magical inhibitors for supernatural beings, something discreet but effective. I was thinking a silver bracelet, something that looks like jewelry but carries a hidden function. Eli raised an eyebrow, intrigued. A bracelet, huh? That could work. I'd need to embed it with runes and a few other enhancements to contain various types of magic. It won't be easy, but I think I can make it happen. Any particular reason for the bracelet? Gunner's eyes took on a steely glint. I have a specific target in mind. Rose. She's dangerous, and I have a feeling we haven't seen the last of her. If she's preying on humans, we need a way to neutralize her abilities without resorting to lethal force. Plus, having something like this could give us an edge against other threats. Eli nodded, a smirk forming on her face. So, we're aiming to put a leash on a fire mage. I love a challenge. It'll take me some time, but I can make it work. I'll start with some prototypes and test their effectiveness. Once we have something reliable, you'll be the first to know. Perfect, Gunner replied. You're just the person for the job. Make sure it's tough enough to handle someone as strong as Rose. If it works on her, we'll have a powerful tool for future encounters. Eli grinned. Don't worry, Gunner. By the time I'm done, this bracelet will be more than just a piece of jewelry. It'll be a work of art. As Clara prepared for her journey back to Alfheim, Eli threw herself into the task of crafting the inhibitor bracelet. She meticulously etched ancient runes into the silver band, layering them with protective spells and enchantments designed to restrain even the most potent magic. With each delicate stroke, she could feel the power growing. the bracelet becoming an elegant but formidable tool. Meanwhile, Clara and Omega said their farewells, the pack gathering to send them off with well wishes and promises to keep her spot ready for her return. They watched as she and Omega passed through the portal to Alfheim, vanishing into the shimmering light. The pack knew she would return even stronger, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Back in the workshop, Eli finally finished the bracelet, holding it up to the light. It gleamed with a faint, magical aura, the runes glowing softly as if alive with their own energy. Satisfied, she slipped it into a small velvet pouch and made her way to Gunner's office. Eli entered, holding the pouch out to Gunner with a look of triumph. "It's ready. This bracelet is no ordinary piece of jewelry. Once it's on, any attempt to use magic will backfire and weaken the wearer instead. I'd love to see Rose try to set fire to anything with this on." Gunner took the pouch, a satisfied smile crossing his face. "Excellent work, Eli. Now all that's left is to see it in action. I'll be sure to give Rose the honor of testing it out." Eli chuckled, crossing her arms. "I'd pay to see her reaction. Just make sure you don't go easy on her. After everything we've been through, she deserves a little payback." Gunner nodded, slipping the pouch into his jacket pocket. "Don't worry. I'll make sure she gets the message. With this, we're one step closer to keeping Earth safe from those who would use magic for their own gain." As they shared a nod of understanding, Gunner couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of determination. With Clara off gaining wisdom from Aeliana in Alfheim, and Eli's crafted inhibitor in his hand, the pack was better equipped than ever to face the challenges ahead. Gunner called the pack together, his eyes focused and resolute as he outlined his plan. He was heading into the Shadow Realm bar with Ashley, his aim clear: to get the enchanted bracelet on Rose, the fire mage. He made no promises of a clean mission, knowing Rose's unpredictability, but he knew it had to be done. After gathering their gear, he and Ashley made their way to the bar, blending into the late-night crowd as they entered. They navigated through the crowded, dimly lit room, finding a table toward the back. Ashley took a seat, casually scanning the crowd, ready for anything, while Gunner fixed his gaze on the bar. There, framed by the soft glow of the bar lights, was Rose. Her red hair fell over her shoulders in waves, catching the light as if it were lit from within. She was magnetic, her presence drawing eyes and attention from everyone around her, a silent pull that was both alluring and dangerous. As he watched, Rose turned and caught him looking. A knowing smile spread across her face as she sauntered over, her eyes never leaving his. "Well, well, look who it is," she purred, her voice a smooth, velvety whisper as she leaned against the table, one eyebrow raised. "I thought I saw you eyeing me." Gunner met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Yes, I am," he replied coolly, his voice steady as his eye glowed faintly blue. "I see your true form, Rose." She giggled, the sound light and airy, yet laced with a hint of menace. "Oh, you're one of those types, she teased, her voice a blend of mock surprise and playful threat. "Glad you like what you see. Maybe later we can explore more of my true form." She leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear as she whispered, "But for now, let's have some fun." Gunner stood firm, unshaken. "I'm here for answers," he replied, his tone low and commanding. "Behave, please." Rose tilted her head, eyeing him with newfound interest. She ran a finger down his arm, a sly grin playing on her lips. "You're no fun," she murmured, "but I do like a challenge." She stepped back slightly, her eyes narrowing as a faint crackle of energy shimmered around her, the telltale signs of a spell forming. But Gunner just smirked, crossing his arms. "You'll have to try harder than that," he said, a hint of a smile in his voice. "Your spells won't work on me." Rose's grin widened, a flash of sharp fangs gleaming in the dim light. "Oh, I'm not here for magic tricks tonight. I'm here for you." She reached up, her hands trailing along his shoulders as she leaned in close. Trust me, I can be quite persuasive when I want to be. Her voice dropped to a sultry whisper, her breath hot against his neck. What's the matter, Gunnar? Afraid you might enjoy yourself? Gunnar met her gaze, unfazed. That won't work on me, Rose. I know why you're really here. She hesitated, her playful demeanour faltering as she glanced away. For a moment her expression softened, and she looked almost vulnerable. Maybe I just wanted a little excitement, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's boring out there, you know. But Gunnar wasn't swayed. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the silver bracelet Eli had crafted. He moved with speed and precision, snapping it onto her wrist before she could react. Rose gasped, her form wavering as her magic was stripped away, leaving her in a more human-like appearance. What have you done? She demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. She tried to pull away, but Gunnar's grip held firm. Just leveling the playing field, he replied, his tone icy. Now we're going to have a little chat. Rose glared at him, her green eyes flashing with defiance. You think this will stop me? She hissed. I may not have my magic, but I don't need it to make you pay. She leaned in close, her breath hot against his ear as she whispered, I always find a way. Gunnar didn't flinch. Then I look forward to it, he replied, his gaze hard as steel. But for now, you're coming with me. He nodded to Ashley, who stepped forward, handcuffs ready. As they escorted Rose out of the bar, a hush fell over the crowd, curious eyes following them as they disappeared into the night. They had accomplished their mission, but Gunnar knew this was far from over. Rose was a formidable enemy, even without her magic, and he had no doubt she would try to escape at the first opportunity. But for now, he had the upper hand, and he intended to keep it. As they drove away, Rose sat silently in the back seat, her eyes fixed on Gunnar with a burning intensity. He could feel her gaze on him, a silent promise of vengeance that lingered in the air. But Gunnar merely glanced back at her, a faint smile playing on his lips. He had faced greater threats than Rose Emberheart, and he wasn't about to back down now. The pack had taken the first step in uncovering the secrets of the Shadow Realm, but there was still much more to uncover. And as Gunnar looked back at the bar fading into the distance, he knew this was just the beginning. The ride to the safe house was quiet, with only the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle as Rose shifted uncomfortably in the back seat. Gunnar drove with practiced precision, his eyes fixed on the road, while Ashley watched Rose from the passenger seat, her gaze unyielding. The safe house was tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city, a small, unassuming building shrouded by dense trees. It had served as Gunnar's hideout years ago, during his time with the agency. He hadn't been back in ages, but the place still held the familiar scent of old wood and the faint traces of countless missions. Inside, Gunnar led Rose to a worn-out chair in the centre of the room. She looked around, her nose wrinkling in disdain as her green eyes took in the dimly lit surroundings. Charming, she muttered, folding her arms over her chest, the silver bracelet still clasped tightly around her wrist. Ashley shut the door and stood by it, arms crossed as she watched Rose with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. So, Gunnar said, breaking the silence as he leaned against the table across from Rose, why don't you tell us what you've been up to? Rose smirked, a glint of mischief in her eyes as she settled back in her chair. What makes you think I'll tell you anything? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Last I checked, I don't owe you a thing. Gunnar's expression remained stoic. No, but you're going to, because you don't have much choice. Start talking. She sighed dramatically, twirling a strand of red hair around her finger as if bored by the whole ordeal. Fine, she huffed. You want to know what I'm doing here? Why I'm luring men to the Shadow Realm bar? It's simple, really. I'm bored. After centuries of being hunted, controlled, and manipulated, a girl needs a little fun. Ashley leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. You call what you do fun? She asked, her tone sharp. Those men you've been toying with aren't playthings. Please, Rose replied, rolling her eyes. I don't hurt them. I just, well, I might enchant them a little, make them think they're having the time of their lives. And they are for the most part. No one gets hurt, and I get a night of entertainment. And what about the fire magic? Gunnar pressed. You're not just some harmless flirt, Rose. You're dangerous, and we both know it. Her gaze hardened, a flicker of something darker passing over her face. Oh, I know exactly what I am, she replied, her voice low. But do you think I asked to be this way? To spend my life on the run because everyone either wants to control me or kill me? Her expression softened, and for a brief moment, a hint of vulnerability appeared in her eyes. I didn't ask for this, she murmured. I just want to live my life without someone trying to stick me in a cage. Ashley raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. You're saying you're the victim here? Rose laughed bitterly. In a way, I am. I didn't ask for you to come after me with that magic dampening device. I'm not a monster, Gunner. I don't hurt people for no reason. I just want to be free, to live my life without interference. Ashley shook her head. So that's it? You're just here for fun? Rose gave a slow, resigned nod. That's it. You can make me out to be the villain all you want, but I'm just living. Or trying to, anyway. But I suppose that's a crime in your book. Gunnar studied her carefully, searching for any sign of deceit. And the humans you've been luring out of the bar? They're just distractions, she said dismissively. They're lonely, they're curious, and I give them a little excitement. Is that such a crime? Gunnar exchanged a glance with Ashley, his expression unreadable. You're playing a dangerous game, Rose. This world isn't yours to toy with. You don't belong here. She tilted her head, her expression defiant. And yet here I am. I'll leave when I'm ready. Until then, I'm not hurting anyone. He held her gaze for a long moment, then finally nodded. We're letting you go. But that bracelet stays on. When you're ready to leave Earth, you'll come to us and we'll take it off. Rose smirked, leaning back in her chair. Fine. Keep your little toy on me. But remember, I won't be here forever. I have my own plans, and they don't involve you. Ashley unlocked the door and stepped aside, watching as Rose stood up, brushing herself off with a faint look of disdain. Well, this has been fun, Rose said, flashing them both a cold smile. But I have better things to do. Gunnar held her gaze, his expression firm. If you step out of line, you won't have another chance. You'll be dealt with. She raised an eyebrow, an amused smile playing on her lips. We'll see about that, she said, before turning and walking out of the safe house, her red hair disappearing into the night. As she left, Gunnar turned to Ashley, a thoughtful look on his face. Think we can trust her? Ashley shrugged. Not in the slightest. But as long as that bracelet's on, she's harmless. And if she steps out of line, we'll be ready. Gunnar nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last they'd see of Rose Emberheart. She was a force of nature, unpredictable and volatile, and he knew that with or without her powers she'd find a way to stir up trouble. But for now they had done all they could. The next move was hers. Gunnar found Ashley in the workshop, surrounded by the familiar clatter of gear and equipment. She was organising supplies for their next mission, her movements deliberate and efficient, a rhythm she'd perfected over countless assignments. The pack had been making some significant changes recently, particularly their decision to work more closely with Homeland Security. That shift had solidified the need for a stronger unified front, and Gunnar knew that extending their inner circle was inevitable. But this time, he had someone unexpected in mind, Eli. As Gunnar approached, Ashley glanced up, already aware of his presence before he even spoke. There was a knowing look in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the weight that lingered between them. She could sense the seriousness of the conversation to come, the decision that had been brewing for a while. You busy? Gunnar asked, though he knew she would always make time for a talk like this. Ashley set down the gear she had been working on and leaned against the table. What's on your mind? We've made a lot of changes lately, Gunnar began, his voice steady but thoughtful. Stepping into new territory with Homeland Security, it's been good for us. but it's time we start thinking about making the pack stronger, more connected. Ashley raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to get to the point. I'm talking about Eli, Gunnar continued. I think it's time we bring her into the pack. Ashley paused, her gaze sharpening as she processed the proposal. The pack had always been more than a tactical unit. It was family, a bond forged through trust, loyalty, and battle-hardened camaraderie. Bringing Eli, an elf, into that sacred circle was unprecedented, and Ashley knew the decision wasn't one to take lightly. She's proven herself, Ashley said carefully. No doubt about that. But you're right. This isn't just a tactical decision. This is family. If we bring her in, it has to be for the right reasons, not just because she's useful in a fight. Gunnar nodded, appreciating her caution. The pack wasn't something you could just walk into. It required a level of commitment and understanding that went beyond shared missions. She's stood by us, Ash, he said, his tone resolute. She's opened portals, saved our skins more times than I can count, and shown loyalty when it mattered most. She might not be a wolf, but she's got a heart that understands what we're about. If we bring her in, I think she'd honour the pack just as much as any of us. Ashley considered Eli's quiet strength, her unwavering determination, and the way she had seamlessly become a part of their team. The elf had earned her place, there was no doubt about that. But the pack was more than a team. It was an unbreakable bond, a lifetime commitment. To bring Eli in meant trusting her with their deepest secrets and vulnerabilities. She's already proven she has our backs, Ashley agreed after a moment of reflection. I think it's time to offer her membership. She deserves to know that she fully belongs here, not just as part of the team, but as part of the pack. A smile tugged at the corners of Gunnar's lips, relief washing over him. He knew how monumental this decision was, and having Ashley's support meant everything. Inviting Eli into the pack would mark a historic moment, but it was also a necessary step toward expanding their unity beyond their familiar boundaries. Then we'll move forward, Gunnar said, his voice lighter now. Let's prepare for her induction ceremony. I think she's going to be surprised, but in the best way. Ashley grinned. Yeah, she won't see this coming. Together they began making plans for Eli's induction. It would be an honour she had more than earned, and when she joined the pack, Gunnar knew she would bring something unique. Her strength, her wisdom, and her unwavering loyalty. Eli wasn't just another ally. She was family, and soon the pack would be whole in a way they had never been before. The pack gathered in the heart of the workshop, the mood a blend of excitement and gravity. Around the table sat Karina, Jewel, Alex, Ashley, Desera, and Bianca, each with their spirit animals close by. The dire wolves, Alpha and Beta, lay beside Ashley and Gunnar, their massive forms radiating both strength and calm. Gunnar took a breath before speaking, his gaze steady as he looked each member in the eye. We're here today to discuss inviting Eli to join the pack. He let the words sink in, noting the thoughtful expressions around the table. She's proven herself more than capable and loyal. I believe it's time we make her one of us. Karina was the first to break the silence. Eli's presence has been nothing but a benefit, she said, her tone firm. She may not be one of us in the traditional sense, but she's got the heart of a warrior. I think her joining would strengthen us, make us more adaptable. Besides, if it weren't for portals, we'd have been in a lot more tight spots. Jewel leaned forward, her eyes warm. She's kind, and she's got a good head on her shoulders. There's a sense of calm she brings, you know? I think that could be invaluable, especially when things get rough. Alex gave a short nod. She might not be a wolf, but that shouldn't matter. What matters is her loyalty, and she's proven that over and over. If anything, having an elf might just be what we need to bring a fresh perspective. Ashley glanced down at Beta, resting a hand on the dire wolf's head as she spoke. I trust her. She's earned it. She's saved my hide more times than I care to count, and I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for her. As far as I'm concerned, she's already pack. Bianca smiled softly. I think having Eli with us would be an honor. She's got wisdom and power, but she's also got heart. And that's what we need most. There was a pause as the pack shared a look, a silent understanding passing between them. They knew Eli's membership would break tradition, but it would also bring new strength and unity to their family. All right then, Gunnar said, nodding as if finalizing a decision. He called out into the hallway, and, moments later, Eli stepped into the room. Her brown hair caught the light, and there was a flicker of curiosity in her bright blue eyes as she took in the scene. She looked to Gunnar, then Ashley, sensing the significance of the moment. Eli, Gunnar began, his voice warm but steady. We've been talking. You've proven yourself time and again. You've stood with us through some of the toughest moments we've faced. We'd like to invite you to become a part of the pack. Eli's eyes widened, surprise and emotion mingling on her face. She looked around the table, the weight of their words settling on her shoulders. I don't know what to say, she managed, a small smile breaking through. This is more than I ever expected. I've always felt like I belonged here, but I never imagined you'd consider me family in this way. Ashley stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Eli's shoulder. You've more than earned it, Eli. We've watched you, fought beside you, and trusted you with our lives. If you're willing, we'd be honored to call you one of our own. Eli's smile grew, her face lighting up as she nodded, visibly moved. It would be my honor, she said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. I've long admired the strength and unity you all share. To be part of that, to be part of the pack, it would mean everything to me. Around her, the pack members smiled, their faces bright with approval. They had forged a new bond, one that would only grow stronger with time. Together they would face whatever lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that they were now one family. The pack gathered at twilight within the ancient courtyard at the center of the workshop grounds. The space, built from stone older than memory, was open to the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. Around the perimeter, flickering torches cast dancing shadows on the walls, illuminating the symbols and runes carved by long-forgotten hands. Eli stood in the middle of the courtyard, her brown hair catching the light as she looked around, sensing the weight of history surrounding her. She felt the presence of the pack members as they encircled her, forming a ring that was both protective and inviting. The wolves, Alpha and Beta, stood at either end of the circle, their eyes steady and knowing. Gunnar stepped forward, holding a small silver dagger with a carved wooden handle. He spoke, his voice reverberating through the quiet night. Eli, you have chosen to walk with us, to fight beside us, and to protect us as we protect you. Becoming part of the pack is a commitment that goes beyond friendship. It's a bond that ties us together, not just as allies, but as family. He held out the dagger to Eli, the hilt toward her. By accepting this, you pledge to honor our code, to protect your brothers and sisters, and to uphold the strength and unity that makes us who we are. Are you ready to join the pack? Eli took the dagger with steady hands, meeting Gunnar's gaze. Yes, she replied, her voice firm. I pledge to honor the pack, to stand with you, and to give my all to protect those I now call family. Ashley stepped forward, carrying a small bowl filled with a dark, fragrant liquid. She nodded to Eli and Gunnar, then dipped her fingers into the bowl, pulling them back stained with the liquid, a mixture of herbs and ash, part of an ancient ritual passed down through generations. Each new member receives a mark of the pack, Ashley explained. It binds us, linking us to each other and to those who came before. It's a reminder that we are more than ourselves. We are part of something greater. Eli held out her right hand, and Ashley gently marked the back of her palm with a rune. The coolness of the mixture sent a shiver up Eli's arm as Ashley traced the symbol for unity and strength, a simple, elegant design that carried deep meaning. The rest of the pack members stepped forward in turn, each pressing their own marked hand against Eli's, transferring a piece of themselves to her, one by one, until the circle was complete. Karina, Jewel, Alex, Desera, Bianca, and the others each shared a moment with her, their silent gestures conveying acceptance and trust. Finally, Clara approached with a small vial. She uncorked it and poured a few drops into the bowl, releasing a smoky, musky scent. "This is essence of spirit root," she explained. "Its scent binds us not only in body but in spirit, connecting us to our animal companions and the land." Eli inhaled deeply, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. The spirit root seemed to ignite a connection deep within her, a sense of belonging that went beyond the physical world. She could feel Alpha and Beta's presence even more strongly, a silent strength radiating from them as they acknowledged her as one of their own. As the final part of the ceremony, Gunnar raised his hand, signaling to the others. The pack released a deep, resonant howl, their voices melding into one powerful sound that echoed into the night sky. Eli joined them, her voice adding a new note to the chorus, a bright, almost ethereal tone that seemed to harmonize perfectly with the wolves' deep calls. When the howl faded, a profound silence settled over the courtyard. Eli stood surrounded by her new family, feeling a deep sense of peace and purpose. Gunnar stepped forward, his face warm with approval. "Welcome to the pack, Eli," he said, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You are one of us now." The others closed in, embracing Eli, welcoming her with open arms and smiles that spoke of acceptance and trust. They stayed there for a time, laughing and sharing stories, basking in the bond they had strengthened that night. The pack was whole, and together they would face whatever the world brought their way. Darren worked in solitude within the armory, meticulously assembling his gear. The faint hum of fluorescent lights above him provided the only sound, underscoring the isolation he felt. He paused, looking around the empty space with a puzzled frown. Normally there was always someone around, a team member tinkering with equipment, exchanging stories, or preparing for the next mission. But tonight, it was just him. Just as he was about to shrug it off, a howl echoed through the hallways, deep and resonant. He recognized it as the call of the pack, the supernatural wolves that accompanied the team. He'd heard the howl before, but this time something was different. It carried a weight, a meaning that he couldn't quite grasp. Curiosity sparked, and he left the armory, quietly following the sounds that led him outside. He moved silently along the shadowed path to the stone courtyard. Darren stopped short, slipping behind a pillar as he took in the scene before him. In the center of the courtyard, Eli stood surrounded by the pack. Gunnar, Clara, Ashley, Karina, Desera, Jewel, and the others. He hadn't realized they were all gathered here. He watched as they moved in a slow, deliberate circle around Eli, their expressions solemn but filled with a quiet intensity. Each member approached Eli, pressing a mark into her hand one by one, as if passing a torch. As the ceremony continued, the wolves emerged from the shadows, their ethereal forms blending into the scene. Alpha, the massive black dire wolf, sat beside Clara, his steely gaze fixed on Eli with an air of approval. Beta, the grey wolf and Alpha's mate, padded over to Ashley, pressing close to her side. Omega, the half-breed, lingered near Gunnar, his eyes glinting as he looked up at him, as if seeking his approval. Then, the pack raised their heads and howled together, the haunting sound filling the night air. Darren had never witnessed anything like this before. He had known the team shared a bond beyond mere camaraderie, but this was different. It was a ritual, a rite that spoke of deep ties and sacred oaths. Darren felt a strange sense of reverence watching it unfold. He could see Eli's expression, the way she closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. Her face glowed with a mixture of pride and humility as she raised her head to join the howl, her voice melding with the others until they were one unified call. He remained in the shadows, transfixed, until the ceremony ended and the pack started to break apart, laughing and celebrating the way only a family could. Darren backed away before they noticed him, heading back into the armory, a feeling of awe lingering in his chest. Later that night, Darren found Gunnar alone by the fire pit, gazing into the flames that crackled and danced under the dark sky. Without a word, he sat down next to him, lost in thought. After a moment, he cleared his throat. I saw what happened earlier. The ceremony. I've never seen anything like that before. Eli's part of the pack now. Gunnar nodded, glancing over at him with a small smile. Yeah, she's pack now. It was her induction. We mark new members that way, welcome them into the family. Darren's curiosity deepened. Why all the ritual? I mean, I get that you're all close, but this felt ancient, like something from another world. It is, Gunnar replied, his tone serious. The pack goes beyond just being a team. We're family, in a way that's as old as time. It's about loyalty, trust, and an unbreakable bond. Once you're in for life. The ceremony is how we seal that commitment. Darren nodded, trying to process the gravity of Gunnar's words. And you've all been through it. Ashley, Karina, Clara, everyone. Gunnar leaned back, crossing his arms. Every single one of us. It's a choice. Nobody's forced into it, but once you're in, you don't walk away. Eli made her choice tonight, and now she's one of us, bound by the same oath. Darren stared into the fire, feeling the weight of what he'd witnessed. He had always thought of the pack as a close-knit team, but he was starting to see that it was something much deeper. He could still hear the echo of their howl in his mind, the raw power of it resonating with something primal within him. I think I get it, he murmured, more to himself than to Gunnar. It's like a family, but one forged in fire. Gunnar looked at him, his eyes thoughtful. You don't have to understand it fully right now. Just know that if you ever decide to join, you'd be welcome. But it's not a decision to be made lightly. Darren glanced at Gunnar, a small smile forming on his lips. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind. They sat in silence after that, each lost in their thoughts as the fire crackled between them. Darren couldn't shake the feeling that he'd witnessed something profound, something that would change the way he saw the pack and his place among them forever. 4 months had passed since their fierce encounter with Ultranacious, the Demon King. While most of the wounds had healed, Gunnar's mechanical arm had been feeling unusually heavy, as if weighed down by an unseen force. He'd chalked it up to regular wear and tear, but Eli noticed something off. Hey, boss, something seems wrong, Eli said as she studied his arm during a routine maintenance check. Mind if I take a closer look? Go for it, Gunnar replied, though there was a shadow of doubt in his eyes. He had faced Ultranacious head-on and emerged victorious, but remnants of that battle haunted him more than he cared to admit. Eli began her adjustments, recalibrating and fine-tuning when Aeliana Vale entered the room. She paused, her ethereal presence commanding attention as her gaze zeroed in on Gunnar. You're carrying something, she whispered, her voice barely audible but resonant with tension. Gunnar furrowed his brow. What do you mean? I thought we vanquished all of Ultranacious's power. What's left? Aeliana's eyes narrowed, her hands hovering over his arm. She murmured something in the ancient language of her people, and a faint, ominous darkness began to seep from the seams of his metal limb, writhing as though it had a life of its own. This shadow, she said, her tone steely, is a remnant of the Demon King's essence. It hid itself deep within you, waiting for a moment of weakness. Eli gasped, stepping back as the darkness twisted and coiled. Jewel appeared in the doorway, her face ashen but determined. We need to contain this now. Eli and Jewel worked in tandem, while Aeliana chanted a protective incantation. The room grew colder, and Gunnar gritted his teeth, feeling the shadow clawing its way through his circuits and into his nerves, almost as if Ultranacious himself were trying to seize control. "This isn't just a shadow," Gunnar managed through clenched teeth. "It's his will, his rage, his power. I can feel it." "We'll get it out," Eli assured him, though her hands trembled. She adjusted the arm's inner mechanisms to expose the shadow, and Jewel quickly trapped it in a vial with a swift spell. The darkness seemed to scream as it was sealed, the faint, twisted face of Ultranacious momentarily visible within the swirling black mist before it vanished. "Is it gone?" Gunnar asked, breathing heavily, his gaze fixed on the vial that now held the Demon King's essence. "For now," Aeliana replied, though her expression remained troubled. "But shadows like this often linger, even after they're purged." They all stood in tense silence, the weight of what they had just encountered settling heavily around them. Gunnar flexed his fingers, feeling lighter but aware that a deeper darkness might still linger. Eli then glanced at his face, noting the scar running across his eye. "You know, we could also take a look at your eye, Gunnar. There's still residual energy there too." He shook his head, a steely resolve in his gaze. "No, that stays. It's a reminder of what we fought and what we defeated. But it's also a warning. This battle isn't over." Jewel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll face whatever comes next, just like we always have." They nodded, each of them feeling the renewed weight of their shared mission. The Demon King might be gone, but his shadow was still a threat, a reminder of the darkness they had vanquished and the vigilance they still needed to maintain. With Reagan's departure to inform Sophia of the Pack's decision, the workshop returned to its usual bustle. Gunnar, now free from the darkness that had plagued him since his battle with the Demon King Ultranacious Eterus, felt a renewed sense of clarity and purpose. His demeanor was lighter, his movements more assured, and the subtle tension that had hung over him seemed to dissipate. As the pack gathered around to check their equipment and prepare for what lay ahead, Eli couldn't help but feel a sense of relief seeing Gunnar back to his old self. The uncertainty of the past few months seemed to fade, replaced by a renewed spirit that coursed through the team. Reagan's mission to HQ marked the beginning of their new partnership with Homeland Security. Yet, it was the camaraderie within the pack that mattered most. Here, among friends and allies, they had forged a bond that no threat could easily break. Though new challenges awaited, they were ready to face them as one, with Gunnar leading the way, as steadfast and unyielding as ever. 2 days after Reagan returned to headquarters, Gunnar was surprised to see Sophia walking into the workshop, her expression serious. She rarely visited Echo Division's hidden base, preferring to handle matters through encrypted communications. But today, her presence indicated something urgent. Gunnar motioned for her to take a seat, sensing that whatever she'd come to say required his full attention. Without preamble, she reached into her bag, pulling out a file and placing it on the table between them. "Sophia," Gunnar said, eyeing the file. "Didn't expect to see you here in person. What's this all about?" Sophia took a deep breath, glancing around the room before she spoke. "I came to bring you this personally. It's about the Shadow Realm Bar and Shade." Gunnar raised an eyebrow. He'd heard whispers about the bar, a haven for supernatural beings who wandered into the mortal world, but he'd never had cause to investigate it directly. "Go on." "Shade came to me," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of disbelief. "Out of the blue. He confessed something I'd only suspected before. He's a supernatural being. And he's been keeping tabs on the bar for quite some time. He told me what goes on there, who frequents it, and how it all works." Sophia leaned in, her tone urgent. "The bar's front is a dive joint, a place where humans mingle without any clue they're rubbing elbows with beings from other realms. But in the back, that's where the real action is. There's a portal that leads to the Shadow Realm, a neutral space where supernaturals gather, barter in artifacts, and exchange information. It's a place for them to be themselves without fear of exposure." Gunnar took the file, flipping it open to scan the details she'd provided. "And what does he want from us?" He wants you to investigate, Sophia replied. There's a lot of activity there lately, more than usual. He thinks Black Dawn might be trying to infiltrate it. He's heard talk of agents moving in the shadows, asking questions, seeking something, though he's not sure what. Shade's too slippery to get caught up in anything, but he's convinced they're looking for a way to expand their reach. Gunnar leaned back, absorbing the information. Black Dawn's resurgence had everyone on edge, and the idea of them infiltrating a haven for supernatural beings was troubling. And you want me to go in? Sophia nodded. You and the pack. I don't have anyone else who can handle that kind of environment. Shade's already taken a risk by telling me what he has. He wouldn't have come forward unless he was genuinely concerned. Gunnar's gaze hardened as he closed the file. Why now? Why did Shade choose this moment to reveal himself? Sophia hesitated before speaking, as if weighing her words carefully. It's because of the pack, Gunnar. You've become something of a legend among the supernatural circles. They're wary of you, of all of us. Word is, even the creatures that walk through that bar are careful not to mention your name. They're spooked. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. They're saying you're the one who killed Ultranacious. They say you and your team took down the Demon King and scattered Black Dawn's forces. They call you the Pack, and the supernatural world is watching, some out of fear, others out of respect. Gunnar's eyes narrowed, a mix of surprise and curiosity flashing across his face. He hadn't expected his reputation to precede him in such a way. So, they think we're legends now. More than that, they think you're untouchable, Sophia said. But that's also why they're wary. They don't know what to make of you. And Black Dawn, they're not just licking their wounds. They're regrouping, and I think they're looking for a foothold in that bar. If they can get influence there, they could recruit, manipulate, maybe even control certain factions within the supernatural world. Gunnar nodded slowly. You want me to go in, feel out the situation, and if Black Dawn's there, deal with it. Sophia nodded. Exactly. I don't have any assets who could get close, let alone deal with what's going on. But you do. I need you to get in there, gather intel, and, if necessary, remind them why they're so afraid of us. Gunnar closed the file, his decision made. All right. I'll take the pack, and we'll head to the bar. We'll see what Black Dawn's up to, and if they're trying to make a move, we'll stop them. Thank you, Gunnar, Sophia said, relief evident in her eyes. You're the only one who can handle this. Just be careful. The Shadow Realm Bar isn't a place that takes kindly to outsiders. Even legends have to tread lightly there. Gunnar gave her a confident smile, the kind that belied the danger ahead. We'll handle it. And if Black Dawn thinks they can stake a claim on our territory, they're in for a rude awakening. As Sophia stood to leave, she paused, looking back at him with a final piece of advice. Watch your back, Gunnar. Even legends can fall. With that, she left, leaving Gunnar alone with the file and a mission that would test the pack's strength, cunning, and their growing reputation as protectors. And perhaps something more.
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next? Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.